This lecture is brought to you by the Jerusalem Sober House. The Jerusalem Sober House is a structured, sober living facility located in the heart of Jerusalem, Israel. For more information on the Jerusalem Sober House and the services we provide, please visit us online at www.jerusalemsoberhouse.com. We hope you enjoy this lecture.
Before I start, I'd like to give a little brief history about myself. The way I got introduced to the 12 steps is because I am an addict and I am an alcoholic. It's a simple, right? So my first introduction to this world was through a personal level. Now, as I got more sober, that's not proper English. As I got more along the line of sobriety, I noticed that there were other methods within getting addicts and alcoholics sober outside the 12 steps. There was harm reduction, so on and so forth. One of the things I noticed though is they did not have, the success that the 12 steps had. The reason being is because of the flexibility of the 12 steps. That's one of the things that people seem to forget. The majority, just so people know, the majority of the 12 steps works along the ideas of cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's like, we change the actions, we change the emotions, we change everything that's underneath. Let's just give a brief history of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps and so on and so forth. Alcoholics Anonymous it's the continuation of several different groups that have started over the last several hundred years of trying to deal with the alcoholic problem. So in the 1800s, for instance, there was a group called the Washingtonians. The Washingtonians got over 100,000 members, sober, but what happened is that eventually they became a temperance movement, and when that happened, the majority of the alcoholics relapsed. Later on came the Oxford groups with their 6 absolute principles, which the 12 steps is loosely based on. Right? Again, we're talking about, when I said before about the flexibility of the 12 steps, the Oxford groups were very much into absolute principles, which we know is something that for an addict or an alcoholic is not, it doesn't work for them. It's like, if you tell an addict he must do something, he will do exactly the opposite. Like a kid with ODD, it's just like, you tell me yes, I'll say no. That's exactly the way it works with addicts and alcoholics. So the 6 absolute principles was admitting hopelessness, getting honest with self, getting honest with another, made amends, helped others without demand, and pray to God as you understand Him. Right? Now the problem is that in the Oxford groups, the concept of as you understand Him meant that you had to follow Jesus. It was a Christian-based organization, and it's like if you didn't follow Jesus, you didn't follow, and not just any Jesus, the Jesus that we said.
Even though it's how you understand Him.
Exactly. Even though it's as you understand Him. Right? Again, we're being told how to live, how to do this, how to do that. Now, the Oxford group had some success with alcoholics, in the 20s, but it wasn't any long-term success. They actually got, there was a tire mogul in Cleveland. They got his son sober, and so that's where the Oxford groups got a lot of its money, in the beginning, because, they get a rich kid to get sober, the fathers, of course, can be grateful. So now, when Bill first got sober, Bill Wilson, one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, first got sober. He got sober through a friend of his named Ebby, who got sober through the Oxford groups. Now, when they went through this process of getting sober, the first thing he said was admitting hopelessness. Now, when we talk about the first step, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. In the 12 and 12, which is one of the cores of the Alcoholics Anonymous program, it starts off in the very first sentence, who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one. Now, that defeat that we talk about, that would be destruction to the normal human being. When we decide what we're doing, how we're doing, and where we're going, it's like, what do you mean, hopeless? I'm done, I can't do anything? And until we get to that point, that is the source of the alcoholic strength to maintain long-term sobriety. Which is, instead of, it's this concept of building within, but how do we build within? We build within through action. First, understanding that I'm done. It's over. The process of it being over is really what the first step is about. If I cannot say that I'm done, I'm over, I can't do this no more. It's like I either have an alcoholic death or a spiritual life, then I'm done. And that concept of having that spiritual life, right, that was part of the start of the first step, which reality wasn't until the 6th step in the Oxford principles, Again, that's one of the problems with the Oxford Principles is the fact that when you look into the addiction field, one of the things that you find is that no matter which model you prefer, be it the disease model, harm reduction, maintenance, whatever it is, one of the things that you will find the common thread running through is spirituality. Spirituality is such a big part of the recovery process because we need it. Harvard did the study in the 90s, talking about how people got sober. And one of the things that they found that only 40% of all addicts across the board, didn't matter what the addiction was, got sober. Got sober through the 12 steps. The other 60% all got sober through other methods. Some people did it through Matt Talbot, like I said, harm reduction, this, that, or whatever. But the common thread running through it all was the spirituality. So now, when we look at that, when we say that this spirituality, is so important, it's like, why do we have, now in the Oxford groups, why do we have that as a sixth step? Because really, that's where we start to draw our strength. So, one of the things that we notice though, is that you break down your 12 steps. The first 3 steps is I can't, he can, so I think I'll let him. It's like, and that's the beauty of it. It's like, I first admitted defeat. I first admitted that I can't do anything anymore. That I'm struggling and I'm stuck. It's, just forgive me, I'm got my nose here. Like getting honest with myself, saying I can't do this anymore. The process of that. One of the things that we talk about, for those who have the sheets, the principles of recovery here, right? We look at the first one, honesty, right? We're talking about, I can't. That's the first honest statement that I ever made. I can tell you the truth that I love your scarf, right? That's a beautiful scarf. That's not being honest, though. No, I actually do like it, but it's an opinion, right?
I want to say I'm also in the program and in the recovery many, many years. When we were having a conversation about what brings an addict to that moment where he says, I can't. It's torn open honesty. It's from the Gehinnom. It's from that place where all the other things haven't worked. That he, it's not like he decides, I say it, decides to be honest. He realizes
he's got no choice to be honest.
He's got no choice.
You want to see what hell looks like? Look into the eyes of an addict. That's it's a famous saying.
Well, famous saying. This last thing, I'll shut up. As someone who wrote a book who works with addictions, Lidrosh Elohim, a Chiloni book, made the statement: you can't get out of the inner, break free from the inner paro, unless you believe that there is something more powerful than paro.
It's true. Jefferson was wrong when he wrote, all men were created equal. I know a lot of atheists who got sober and stayed sober for a long time. And it's funny because there's no contradiction in the spiritual principles, But they all believed in something more powerful than themselves.
But is that not atheism? That's not atheism. Atheists don't.
The group, see?
Okay, not God. Atheists is not God. They don't believe in God.
Yeah, they don't believe in God.
But something bigger
See,
than them.
the waves.
Listen, there's something bigger than everybody. I'm 6'9", 400 pounds. I believe I'm the biggest man in this room. There's somebody out there that's bigger than me. Remember that. I was watching wrestling last night. The guy, the Big Show, he's like over 7 feet tall, 500 pounds. He's bigger than me. All right. So we talked about, getting that honesty. But now that we're at that point, right? We're honest. Our soul is laid out bare. What now? The second step says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So in the first step, I admitted I'm insane. I admitted I'm hopeless. I admitted I'm done, right? Now, in order to move forward, I've got to realize that I have something else, So that something else is again, we say a higher power. Now, when we talk about God, we talked before about atheists, what is a power greater than ourselves? Because that's what we talk about. If you look at the 12 steps, it's very specific about a power greater than ourselves. Because what do we say? One of the things that we as addicts, like to do, addicts in general, we like to have this idea that we are God. It's like, I'm God. So if I'm God, there can't be another God. So now I'm saying that there's something outside of me. And I'm recognizing that I'm going from this process of like, me, to there's a whole world out there. It's amazing, like watching that click in somebody.
Well, that's something very, very interesting.
Sure.
I just think this is very interesting. I mean, what you're describing and what I'm hearing is like infant development. I mean, child development. That's child development. That's how a child enters the world. They have no other concept than
Well, recovery is being reborn.
Exactly. Well, I got a little secret for you.
Yeah.
Most addicts are children.
Infants,
It's like
babies.
it's like you should come to some of my groups. You'll notice that some of them are. There's a lot of children.
Well, because the whole thing of discovering something outside is a lifelong, like a
For sure. Listen.
thing that we always
But
crossing.
if you realize, like, what's the whole addict mentality? Whole addict mentality is to bring everything inward. It's like me. I'm covering up for pain. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to be there. I don't want to do this. I. The reason why we talk about, to go back to the first step, the reason why we talk about the first word in the first step is the word we, because that's the first part of recognizing that there's something out there outside of you. So when we look at that and we say, like, I'm no longer all about me, I'm now about something else. But you know what? I can't do it by myself. That's the beauty of the 12 steps. It's run through with somebody else who's been through the process. Because for me, if I were to look at it and say, I got to do the 12 steps by myself, I don't even have, I'm just looking at it and going, I'm done. So I say, essentially, I've got a sponsor, I guess like a Rebbe kind of thing, who take me through it because he's done it. He knows what he felt like, what he went through as he himself did it. And even when you look at the guys the original 100 drunks, the ones who wrote down the 12 steps, which were expanded from the 6 absolute principles of the Oxford groups, they went through it and they did it. And they saw what was wrong with the Oxford groups, because the reality is that like the only absolute we really got in the 12 steps is the fact that there are 12 steps. It's like I don't have to do any of this. I mean, I don't have to take a parachute when I jump out of an airplane either. Because
it's more of a process.
It's definitely a process. But just like not taking a parachute when I jump out of an airplane, what happens? It's pretty self-explanatory. As an addict, I'm like, well, if I'm not going to take a parachute, I'm going to die. If I'm not going to do the 12 steps, if I'm not going to do something into the recovery process, if I don't go through my life and get an understanding of who I am, what I am, and where I'm going, then, I'm done. So the second step, as we say, now all of a sudden we've got this concept of hope. One of the famous, I can't remember what they called. With the letters, it means the whole sentence or something like hope, hold on, pain ends, right? It's like, we talk about that. It's like, all of a sudden, I got something out there, right? I've got something where I say to myself, you know what? I'm not just stuck in this world. I can get out of this. I can do something. I can achieve something great. We've had American presidents who are alcoholics. And drug addicts, We've had like scientists, we've had like doctors, lawyers, all sorts of things. Congressmen, It's amazing what an addict or alcoholic can do. One of the things we need to do first is get sober. Without sobriety, everything else is second fiddle. As a traditional addict, I just need my coffee, so sorry.
It's just another drug.
Mm-hmm. All right, now we're talking about came to believe. Now that's a process, as we see before. Again, we're talking about processes. The concept of coming to believe something. Like that means I didn't believe in the first place. Again, I am God, recognizing that there's a process out there, that there's something else out there. Came to believe in what? That a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, which means we are insane. We don't know right from wrong, according to the legal definition. You know, we don't feel, we don't act, we don't do things like a normal human being would. And that's the truth. You ask any addict when he first walks into the rooms, he's like, you look at him and you're just like, I don't understand what you're doing there. Like, you're just not normal, right? And that's the process of becoming normal. You know, I look at myself today and where I was back then, you know, to speak personally, is that like, I'm a business owner, I'm a father, I'm a husband, you know, I'm many things in my life, you know, and that's all because I got sober. Everything happened before then. Before I got sober, it was a different story. I wasn't able to accomplish anything. I wasn't able to do anything. You know, and now another thing that we're talking about is, again, we were talking about that hope, but other thing is the open-mindedness. We're talking about that understanding to see that there's something else out there, like that open-mindedness there, that all of a sudden, you know, it's like we look at it and we're like, whoa, what about this one? You know, and we start to go through this process, and you know what? We like to fight. Everybody loves a good fight. No, it can't be this, it can't be that, blah, 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 blah. You know, we even talk about, like, you know, how when we start looking at it and we talk about intelligence and, you know, how I can be smarter than this and I can figure this out on my own, blah, blah, blah. You know what? You want your intelligence, keep your intelligence. But the way we got to go through it is we got to go through it with humility. You know, I can be as smart as I can be, but I got to be humble with it. If I don't have the ability to listen and understand and grow, then I'm really not going to accomplish much out of it. If I'm sitting in a session with someone and I'm going through some, you know, biopsychosocial thing, and it's like, and they're like, and you know, and they're not understanding, and they're not doing anything, then what am I doing? I'm talking into the wind, which is just going to disappear. So it has to be something more concrete than that. Which leads us to the third step. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over the care of God as we understood Him. Now, we talked about 1, I can't. 2, I can. You know, 3, so I think I'll let him. I can, he can, so I think I'll let him. Excuse me. Right? All it is a decision. I mean, understand the God steps, 3, 7, 11, as they're called, right? Think of it as a relationship. You know, I'm out at the park, I see a pretty girl. You know, I make a decision that I want to ask her out on a date. You know, it's like as I go on, you know, that's the start of the third step, is I've made that decision. But in order to make that decision, the first thing that I need to do is I need to get to that spot where I'm willing to do it. That willingness that we have, that willingness to grow. You know, that's where, you know, it stems out of that. You know, which obviously gives us faith, as we're talking about, as when you see the list. You know, we're talking about all of a sudden, I've got something out there. If you look at the third step prayer that I printed up for everyone, you know, for those who are listening at home, God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Like that line right there, relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Now we're talking about, you know, step 1, saying I'm done. Step 2, saying there's something else out there, like something outside of myself. It's like, okay, God, show me how to do this. Teach me, you know, and not for my sake, for Your sake. That's the beauty of it. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those that I would help with Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Amen. You know, it's like, and then it's like we go over here, you know, and further on, you know, there's an addendum to the step is, God, take my will in my life, guide me in my recovery, show me how to live. Amen. Now, I personally like to add something else to that, you know, in a way that I can understand. Because I'm a little thick, in a way that I can understand, you know. I'm a little thick-headed at times, you know. You can ask anybody who works with me. You know, they're all shaking their head yes, just in case anyone's from the outside that didn't see it. You know? It's like, that's really what we're talking about here. It's like, we're talking about having God in our life, having a process where it's like we recognize that spirituality is what's really going to save me. But I can't have that saving without first getting an understanding of who I am and what I am, which leads us to steps 4 and 5. Step 4, I made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. right? What are we doing right there? Like, we're talking about courage. We talk about, how hard it is to really take a good look at ourselves. It's not a list of everything that we've done wrong. It's not a list of who we hurt and this, that, and whatever. It's a list of ourselves and our emotions and what we did and how we acted and how we lived, how we grew, all the stuff that was going on. And it's fearless. We look at ourselves and we say, this is who we are. This is what we do. I look at it and I say, in the big book, it gives the example of like, the alcoholic, he's resentful against Mr. Brown because he gave, the job to so-and-so. Well, I got back at him by sleeping with his wife, and it affects my self-esteem, my relations, and so on and so forth. And you look at it and you're just like that's really what I want. I want about my actions. I don't care what somebody else did. I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous that the only thing that we can do is clean up our sides of the street. That's it. All we can do is fix ourselves and learn that other people have their own thoughts. Other people have their own free will to do as they please. And it's how I react, how I act in life. That serenity that I have in my life, that I'm able to, that it's based on the work that I've done on myself. So now when we look at that, we talk about courage. We talk about the ability to face that fear. Because that's really what a hero is. When we look at it, what is a hero? A coward and a hero are the exact same thing. Right? They're both afraid. They're petrified of what's there. What makes someone a hero is the fact that they're willing to face those fears. And as we go on through it, as we look through it, we see, I don't want to be afraid anymore. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to be in sorrow. I don't want to be this creature that I was. Which leads us to the fifth step, which is all about integrity, admitting to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Now, I admit to God, listen, first thing, if I'm already understanding that there is a God out there, if I'm understanding that, I've given him my will in my life, then he already knows everything. I already know that he knows everything. But now we're talking about the infant before. That process, recognizing that infant's going to recognize that mom knows what's going on. Mama knows what you've done. So, but we're just finally admitting it. And we're admitting it to ourselves and to another human being. We're admitting it to a sponsor who goes through it. We go through it and we understand that there's patterns over there. We understand that there's a way of going through it, of how we acted, how we grew, what we did, so on and so forth. We said to ourselves, what are things that I've done? Right? I know that when I do X, that Y is going to happen. And when Y happens, I react with Z. And when Z happens, I wind up getting arrested. So I should avoid it when it comes to X. I see the pattern of behaviors, and I change the pattern of behaviors because that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for these things. One of the things that I want people to realize is that when we go through the 12 steps, we care more about our actions. We learn that, we talk about, things as like happiness and so on and so forth. Happiness is a tangible result of doing the right thing. We don't focus so much on what makes us happy. We focus on doing the right thing. If I'm upset, if I'm sad, if I'm angry, I'm this and that, whatever, I wind up doing service that I learned about in the 12th step because that takes me out of how I'm feeling. I move a muscle, change a thought. With these same basic principles that we learn, so much of what we do in the addiction world nowadays, all the things that all the experts talk about nowadays, so much of it is based on the principles that we learned within the 12 steps. This is really the history of it, which we continue on to 6. Now that we've admitted to God, to ourselves, and another being, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Now again, we talked before about, we can't do any absolutes. Absolutes just don't work, right? When we did it over there. Just lost my train of thought here. When we did it over there, the most important part of this is the willingness to change, right? Again, we continue on with that willingness, but we're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. What willingness are we talking about? I don't know what it's going to take for me to lose the ability to be. I come in and I'm a liar. I don't want to be a liar anymore. What is it going to take for me to lose that lying? Don't know. but I have to be willing to learn about it. I have to be willing to go through the process. It's going to be painful, it's going to be rough, but I have to be willing. I have to have that desire to change. And if I don't have that, again, we're focusing on these things. We're focusing on like all these actions that we're doing with it. You know, which gets to the seventh step, which is humbly asking to remove our shortcomings. Now, I've got this willingness. I go through this process. I went through steps 4 and 5, where I got an understanding of who I am and what I am in a way that I never understood before. I just never had this, I was never able to grasp this concept. So now, in step 6, I'm like, I'm really not a good person, but I am a good person, yes?
What allows you as an addict, what interaction with the people you're working allows you to what you just mentioned, and I also lost the word, they come to admit the lacunes, come to want to see the...
You want to see the change? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just wondering, you have somebody who's working with you.
Yeah.
What makes that crystal clear to you that allows you to start thinking in those terms? What's part of, you talk about the process a little bit, the interaction with your mentor.
Right, so that process with the mentor, it's like he's been there and done that, right? He knows exactly where I'm holding when we talk about this. When I take somebody through the 4th and 5th step process, right? I know my experience with that, you know, and I know that I've done it several dozens of times actually, right, with other people, and I knew that each process was different. I also know that for myself, I've gone through it several times. And I knew each time I did it, it was different. And each time was deeper and deeper and finding a new understanding of myself. A new depth of like who I am and what I am and what I need to change. I mean, it's, like we're talking about, the whole thing is really just a process. Like this is not the ends. This is just the means. You know, we're getting there. The ends is to be a healthy person. And that's gonna happen the day after we die. You know, until then, we're just progressing towards that.
I think partly in answer to his question, there's a word that's missing here, but you're talking all about it, which is surrender. You know, when I realize I can't, and tell me, and I'm ready. You know, Black Sabbath spiritual song, Lord, I want to be ready. It's just getting ready from having been to the bottom of the bottom.
This is true. Surrender is a very powerful word. And the best thing about surrender is that after you've surrendered, you have acceptance in your life. I love it.
So what would allow you to differentiate between surrendering and giving up? Giving up hope, despairing. Is it the same? Is it different?
No, it's extremely different. You know, giving up is simply like, I'm done and I'm just going to roll over and die. Right? You know, there's a paradox that we talk about within the first step. I can't believe I missed this. I actually feel embarrassed by this. You know, there's a paradox we talk about called surrender to win. You know, surrender to win.
To win.
Yeah. So let's go back to Greek mythology, if I may, right? The Trojan War. You know, Troy had these crazy walls. The Greeks tried for 10 years to get into the walls, right? They couldn't do it. So what did they do? They surrendered. And as a parting gift, they gave them the Trojan horse, which just happened to be filled with, you know, a whole bunch of soldiers. And, you know, at night when they brought the horse in, they went in, they killed the guards, they opened the gates, all the Greeks came in and sacked the city, right? Surrender to win, you know? I give up all that pain, I give up all that agony, and I win. I give up the willingness to hold on to what I had. And I say, your will, not mine, be done. You know? And now I have acceptance in my life. And now I can understand that when person X upsets me, I realize that's because something's going on inside of him and he's in pain. And I no longer have to get angry when person X starts yelling at me. I can accept that's what's going on. But that's all the process of growth that we're talking about. That's serenity, you know? So, again, you know, let's go, where was it? Step 6 in willingness, yes? Did I finish that or did I hold on?
You're on 7, huh?
I was on 7, okay. Step 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Again, now I'm realizing though, that it's not a process. Like, it's a process where I had to do the groundwork, I have to do the legwork, but I realize that it's a process where it's not going to happen through my words, through my work. It's going to happen because God's going to have it take it away for me, right? It's like, the idea being is that, like, I have to get humble to realize that, like, listen, as any addict will attest to, you know, every addict tried to get sober at some point by themselves, and it didn't work. If it did work, they wouldn't be in the AA or NA. Simple as that. They wouldn't be in a program of rehab, a detox, you know, a halfway house, or the Jerusalem Sober House, whatever it is. They wouldn't be here. They would be somewhere else, right? So the fact that here they realize that they can't do it by themselves, that God's going to do it for them. Now in here, I also printed up the 7-step prayer, right? Again, we're talking before about a relationship with God. 3rd step, I asked God out for a date. 7th step, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in my way of usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. So now I understand that I have the strength to change from God. But see, here's the interesting thing. When I take away the bad, when I take away what I am, who I am, and it's like, oh, well, I'm a liar and I'm a thief and blah, 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 blah. You know, I have a void there. So I need to fill up that void with something good. If I don't do that, if I don't change what it is that I had, then I'm going to go back to that. Because, like, listen, reality is I'm a liar. If I don't put in there that honesty, if I don't put in the opposite meter, what? Trait. If I don't put in, thank you. If I don't put in the opposite trait, you know, then I'm just going to go back to it.
When you're working with an addict and he's getting ready, she's getting ready to surrender his character defects, and he's left with that void, as you called it, as a therapist, do you at that point try to not soften it, but try to make him aware at that moment of the other things that are left in him, those other things he wasn't in touch with, like no. His kindness.
Listen, yeah, a lot of that's going to come out naturally. You know, one of the things that I love is letting the process come out naturally. I do not believe in softening anything for anybody, right? It's very rare that I will do such a thing. I'm blunt trauma, as they say. I'm like a sledgehammer, a bull in a china shop. I don't know how else they want to describe me. That's my theory. You know, I'm not what?
It works for you.
It does. It does work for me. I say things that most people would be like, I said I quit. You know, but it does work. I've been very successful in that methodology because I believe in brutal honesty.
Is this in a therapy setting?
Yeah, especially within a therapeutic setting. You know, and the beautiful thing about therapy versus the 12 steps is that, like, listen, I say this to my clients, right? You come to me for stuff that you don't do with your sponsor. You come from me for stuff that you don't do within the 12 steps. You have stuff that you need work done. You know, you're confused about something. I have no problems giving you a hand with that. But that's not why you come to me. You have meetings. You have a sponsor. You deal with that stuff. You come here for therapy. You come here for addictions counseling. That's what you do.
But they know about your background.
Oh, of course. I mean, Jerusalem is a very small recovery community.
No, but even if it weren't that, I don't live in Yerushalayim.
No.
Even if it weren't that.
Yeah, it's for sure. I mean, listen, one of the things is every article that they ever printed up about me was the fact they put in that I'm in recovery, right? You know, it's just the way it is. Now, because of that, they also have my contact information in all those different articles. People have been contacting me from around the world and saying, emails, phone calls, whatever, asking for help because they knew that I'm honest about it. Which is very interesting because you find that a lot of people don't, again, it's Alcoholics Anonymous. So people have their own choices. There's a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had a sponsor who worked for the United States government in a specific capacity. That if they found out that he was an alcoholic, he would have been fired from his job. Or as he said it, reassigned. That was the word. Reassigned. Right? Because he, but so it's like nobody knew that he was an alcoholic outside of the rooms of AA. And he didn't really mingle so much with a lot of people in AA. He only mingled with people that he knew he could trust.
So part of what I'm hearing, what I but I also feel is that you can afford to be brutally honest with one of the things that they know about is the gadol is that this works.
Yes.
This works.
Listen, one of the things about me is like, I don't just like talk the talk, I also walk the walk, right? You know, and when I screw up, you know, because I screw up all the time, mind you. I'm not exactly what you call a saint, you know? It's like, what happens? People see that. People see that I'm human, you know? And that like, even with all the time that I have, I'm still human. I'm still just another drunken junkie, just like everybody else. As a matter of fact, I was at a meeting yesterday, and this man with over 25 years of sobriety, so he gave the lead at the meeting, which is, opened up with the topic and everything. And he was talking, now he's a guy who works with geriatrics, he's a social worker, and so we were talking about it. And he has this one guy who's very yeckish in his ways. Like the guy's always on time, always makes phone calls, he's always this, whatever. So one day he missed a meeting. So he goes to the guy's house, knocks on the door, there's no one there. They calls the ambulance comes in, they break down the door, and what do they see? They see that he's in his bed. He had died in his sleep. Now with 25 years of recovery, he sees the guy's got a gold chain on his chest, right? He's like, I could pinch it, nobody would know. That thought process, it's still inside of us. Like we have to work on a daily basis to constantly put this in our lives. Because it's still inside of us that we're constantly working on it, constantly growing, constantly changing. Like I said before, the only time I'm actually going to be healthy is the day after I die. I know that process. I know that that's why I have that willingness. That's why I have the humility. That's why I have the understanding that God is going to help me. Because I didn't have the strength to do this myself in the first place. Again, like I said before, if I did, I wouldn't be here.
Did you shomer mitzvot before?
No, I became a Baal Tshuva because of the 12 steps.
You mentioned before about the distinction in the kind of a cognitive approach or behavioral approach, and 12 steps are perhaps more behavioral, in your actions. When looking through the steps, so many of them seem to be a kind of cognitive shift or an emotional shift. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering where within the steps where the actions come about, because we're talking here about humbly asking to remove our shortcomings, but it's not us necessarily doing the work, or admitted to God, or all these things. Just wondering where the actions come into it within the steps.
When I first got sober, I remember back a long time ago, I had this Irish drunk for a sponsor. We get on our knees, and I mind you, at the time I was not religious, and we get on our knees, and he holds my hand, and we start praying to God, and he says, let's admit defeat. And it was just like, the thing was, it was the most spiritual moment of my life to this day. When I finally said, I'm done, I've had enough. It's like when we talk about our actions, what is our actions? What is it that we change? When I say that I've admitted that I'm an alcoholic, that means that when I start drinking, my world goes to hell. So I can't start drinking. That's my action, man. I admit that there's a God out there and that he's got the power. My action is prayer. My action is like recognizing these things. Like I still have to do the footwork. God's not going to come down, and run my business,
Let's say like removing my shortcomings.
Yes.
So is it just that kind of, that cognitive shift where I ask God to remove that, maybe I pray, but do I remove the shortcomings?
Yes, for sure. Like you have to realize that the strength to remove the shortcomings comes from God, but you yourself actually do the legwork, right? Like you yourself, like to go back to before about the lying versus the honesty. It's like you yourself, stop lying. You yourself, be brutally honest. You yourself say this is what's what, But you realize though that you didn't have that strength before, because if you did, you would have done it. But since you didn't, you got it from God. It's that humility, that understanding that like we are not who we think we are. There's something greater out there that's helping us along. We talk, listen, from a religious standpoint, we talk about in the Mishnah that God created the entire universe just for us. It's like he gave us the power though. He created us. Doesn't matter the entire universe was created for me. It's like, but he did it for me. He gave me that power. No matter what I do, that's one of the reasons why I became religious, is because I realized no matter what, I was created for a purpose. I was created for a need. I was created for something else. And God did that. So I'm simply fulfilling what He asked me to do. To go weiter, to go further on. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Right? So now what do we do? What? There you
For
go.
us, it's every day.
100%.
It's every day.
Hold on, we're gonna
And
get.
also-
Oh, hold on! You don't jump the gun. We're gonna get to that in 10. Right? You know,
Well, except that we couldn't do it when fasting every day.
this is true.
No,
I mean,
you meant to do
listen.
every day.
You can fast every day. I have a belly. I like to eat. My people, but I can eat. I can eat at night.
My drug of choice is food.
I understand that. You know, I understand that one a lot. A little too well. Let me go back to this. To make a list of all persons we had harmed, became willing to make amends to them all. Right? So now, what are we talking about? We're talking about brotherly love. We're talking about the ability that I hurt people. Plain and simple. That's what I did. I hurt people, and you know what? I'm making a list of every single person that I hurt. Right? It doesn't matter whether or not I'm going to actually make the amends to them. It's like I hurt Bob and Jane and Sammy and George and blah 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 blah, Trudy, whoever else, right? You know, it's like I hurt all these people, and I'm making that list simply to say I'm willing to make amends to these people. I'm willing to go up to them. And by the way, just so people realize, to get a definition of amends, right? Amends is not asking forgiveness. That it is not that. Amends is making things right. Where there is wrong, we make it right. Simple as that. But there's a man. There's a man in New York named Thomas Heatley. He talks about the amends process. You know, he talks about, you know, he had a client where he said that he drove into this guy's house drunk. The guy who happened to be his son, but he didn't know it. So he tore out the entire front of this guy's house, his son's house, and whatever. When he got sober, what did he do? He rebuilt the guy's house. That's doing the amends. It's not like, oh, I'm sorry, you know, well, I'm still stuck with this $20,000 bill of a broken house, you know? No, he actually fixed it. You know, I myself had a client who liked to, he was a graffiti artist, right? Spray painted everything, right? So he's like, how do I make amends for that? He says, grab some paint and a paintbrush, go to the park and start painting, you know the,
Over it.
what?
Over it.
Yeah, no, not over it, but I had him paint all the benches. You know?
Repaint, yeah.
Just repaint the benches. They all needed to be painted anyway, so it was like, instead of having the town do it, go out, drop a few bucks for the paint, grab a paintbrush, and start painting, you know, the benches. So make it look nice for everybody. You know? It's about service, about changing who we are and what we are. You know? So now here's the thing. Now we talk about in the first half, I make this list of anybody I hurt. Now the second part is, again, that willingness that we were talking about before. I became willing to make amends to them all. Right? It doesn't, like I said before, it doesn't matter what their actions were. I have to be willing to clean up my side of the street. I have to be able to go to sleep at night with a clean conscience. In order for me to do that, I have to clear up. I have to clean up my side of the street. I become willing to make amends to them all. It's a process, like we say. Again, there are no absolutes, you know? But, like you're saying, I want to sleep at night. I want to have a peaceful sleep. Something that I didn't have when I was using. So, step 9. Make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So here, one of the things that we're talking about, like, listen, I cannot make direct amends to everybody. It's just not going to happen. Some people are dead. Sometimes to make amends to them all, you know, would hurt them. You know, it's like if I put a guy in a wheelchair and I go up to this guy, I'm going to freak him out. I'm going to hurt him again just by him seeing me. How can I go and make amends to that person like that? You know, there's got to be some other way I can do it. I cannot make a direct amend to that person. And sometimes the amend will hurt myself or somebody else. Like if I hurt Bob, right, and I go up to Bob and I say, you know what, how do I make amends with you? What can I do? You know? But Bob's wife, who's there, Jane, and she starts freaking out that I'm there, and she gets all upset, and she winds up in this emotional panic because I'm there. I can't do that as well either. I have to do it in such a way where I don't injure somebody else by doing that amend. The classic story is a guy broke someone's knees, gets sober and says, hey, how do I make amends for doing it? He says, you know what? You can set up a college fund for my kids, right? So it's like, how does he set up a college fund for the kids? He goes and breaks somebody else's knees, so he gets paid for that. It's like, what did you just do? You just continued making this just as bad. You're injuring somebody else. We have to learn that discipline of like what's the right thing to do in the right situation, what's the wrong thing to do in the wrong situation. How to be. One of the things that we talk about as humility is knowing what to do in a situation and actually doing it. Sometimes the best thing to do is to do nothing. So now, we were talking before, step 10, the cheshbon nefesh, as you like to, as we'll bring it up, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And we do this on a nightly basis. We say to ourselves, where was I right? Where was I wrong? What could have I done better? What amends do I have to make? What do I have to? What do I have to fix? What did I do? We go back and forth and like what we did right and what we did wrong. To clean up the day, to clear it up, to be like, I could have done this right, I could have done that right, whatever. And I make this list and I get an understanding of like really what's going on. And it's hard to do this on a daily basis. There's a reason why we talk about perseverance. We do this, and we do this. We have this perseverance. We have this resiliency within ourselves to live in a healthy manner, to grow, to move, to change. It's absolutely amazing what we find. We find that we become this person that people want to be around. Now we find that we become sane, right? We talk about in the second step, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, right? And one of the things that that it talks about in the big book is like, when do we become restored to sanity? And the big book, it says in the 10th step, that's when we start becoming sane. As we were talking about before, about being, about learning, doing right from wrong, about looking things like a normal, healthy human being. This is when we really start to get it. This is when we really see how we've hurt other people, how we grow, how we change, and like what we've done and how it affects others. Excuse me. So then we come to step 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Well, let me see if I got this right. So now I've got a relationship with God. I've got this awareness that I didn't have beforehand. Like going out on a date, right? What happened? We got this relationship that I started. I made a decision to ask her out. Then we went out. Now I've got a relationship going on where it's like we're back and forth. We have an understanding of who we are, and the more we do it, the more we talk. Because what is prayer? Prayer is talking. When I'm praying, I'm talking to God. I'm saying, God, this is all of me. Right? Meditation is God's talking to me. And that's where I get this awareness of God. I'm improving my conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry out. What does that mean? That means is that I'm trying to do God's will. I'm trying to live that spiritual life. Now, just for anyone who's listening at home, we're talking about God in Alcoholics Anonymous. We make no differentiate whether it's Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Hashem, whoever, right? We make no definition. God is good, for an atheist, it's good orderly direction, grow or die, group of drunks, so on and so forth. God is merely an understanding that there's something more powerful than me out there. And I get this understanding of who He is and what He is. Now, we have this 11-step prayer. For those at home, I'll read it out to you. Lord, make me a channel of Thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love. Where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. Where there is discord, I may bring harmony. Where there is error, I may bring truth. Where there is doubt, I may bring faith. Where there is despair, I may bring hope. Where there are shadows, I may bring life. Where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than be loved. For it is by self-forgetting, that very important right there, it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. When we're talking about that losing that self, like we were talking about before, but understanding as an infant, there's somebody else out there. Somebody else is trying to help guide us. We talk about spirituality, in recovery. We talk about like getting this understanding of who we are and what we are, so on and so forth. It's like I realize that I'm merely a vessel, merely a cleat to do somebody else's will. Now, if you look at every major religion out there, they all follow that same principle. Be it Christians or Jews or Muslims, or everybody's following what they believe is to be God's will.
That's a problem.
This is true. It is a problem.
The terrorists believe that also.
I want you to understand something, in the way I understand it. There is no conflict with spiritual principles. Doesn't matter which religion you believe. It's like if something is spiritual, there'll be no conflict within Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, whatever. There's an interesting book written by this Southern Baptist minister. I'm trying to remember the name of it offhand. I just lost it. I had it in my head a second ago. So pretty much, he had a lot of issues with Christianity, because according to Christianity, a guy like Mohandas Gandhi is going to burn in hell. But what did he do? He helped save millions of Indians, and it's like why is he going to burn in hell? Oh, because he's not Christian. He's like, but he was a good man. He did good things his entire life. So why would he? Why would he burn in hell? Like, what's up with that? What kind of God is that? And he says the reason why Christianity believes that is because he is a Hindu. So he looked through the concept and he said, if you look at it, if you look through all the religions out there, there are certain common threads that flow through it. And it's like those are the threads that he finds, those spiritual principles. He's like, where there are no conflict. I mean, it's very important to find those spiritual principles. That things that we're talking about, the honesty, the trust, the faith, so on and so forth. Like that's yes.
Could we take a little backtrack to?
Sure.
As a recovering person who's also a therapist, both of those things many years, I'm really interested in hearing how you differentiate between your work, let's say as a therapist, and your work with someone else in the program. You said some things that you would say, in therapy that, I'm really curious. I believe that the combination is magical.
Well, for sure. I mean, listen, I work within a combination of two things, right? I mean, primarily, I work with the concept of CBT and trauma. And the type of trauma that I believe that is we have the ability to heal ourselves, right? We just have to let ourselves do it. Get ourselves out of our own way. Like you get a scab, you get a cut in your arm. What happens? Build a scab. Eventually the scab falls off. The skin is back. There will be a lot of times there will be a scar. Sometimes there's not.
But in how you respond, how you dialogue in therapy, that's different than in a 12-step.
Well, first off, I change a lot of. I start off with the basic idea is I change the wording. So the client themselves realize that they're in a therapeutic session versus an AA session. Like when I talk about like, when I talk in a scheme of Alcoholics Anonymous, I talk about action. What is your action? What is your behavior that you're physically focusing on right now? Right? When I'm talking about therapy, I'm doing the opposite. I'm talking about the emotion that's behind the action. That's more that I know I'm doing it in a very general way and not specific. Because at this point I'm drawing a blank on a specific example, but that's more in like what I did is like I focus on like what's behind it, like the behavior. It's like, okay, this is the behavior. What is behind it? What is the emotion behind it? The sadness, and where does the sadness come from? And I want to find the core, and I want to take that core. I want to be like, what can we do about it? You know, whereas like in AA, it's like more of like, you know, when you do the 12-step idea, it's like, okay, I don't really care where it came from right now. I want to know that you're acting like a, you know, you're not acting like a good person. Let's get you to act like a good person, and then we'll like clear all that up.
So take it. I'll get you specific.
Sure.
The case where someone was abused in childhood, even let's say emotional abuse by one parent or the other, and then started, as a result, couldn't cope with the feelings, started to use, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or food.
Right. So that's very common, right? You know. So personally, when it comes as a therapist, when someone has the sexual abuse, right? I'm an addictions counselor. I'm not a psychologist, right? So I tend to avoid a lot of the deep processes that go with that. You know, like I will refer that out. You know, I know my capabilities, I know my limitations, and that is something that's out of me. When it comes within the 12-step process, one of the things that I will tell the person, and you'll have to forgive my cussing, is, you know, I'll say to the guy, forgive the bastard, you know, and pray for him. And the client will, or the member of AA will ask me, you know, why? Why do you say forgive the bastard? I'm like, well, first off, the guy's a bastard for doing it, you know? He's like, but we're talking about your side of the street. And we're talking about your ability to like live in life and live in this world, you know? And I found that by focusing on that forgiveness, you know? And I was like listen, you talk to a lot of people who've been abused sexually, you know, they're angry at God, they're angry at their parents, they're angry at so many people, you know? And it's like, there's so much anger there. All they see is that anger, you know, and you know, so it's like when someone's got that, I say, you know what, I send them to my supervisor, like, Sanford, this is for you. You know, it's like here, you know, it's like you're the LCSW with all the letters after your name, that's for you. I'm the simple addictions guy, you know? It's like, but I'm very much into the idea of forgiveness. It's like you forgive the bastard and like, you know, pray for him. Because that action of prayer, you know, is immense, you know?
Changes the brainwaves.
Exactly. You know, we're talking about the cognitive approach, you know, the CBT approach, like that's where it comes in. We talk about this idea of like changing how we look at a situation, you know? You know? It's one of those things where we realize that like we have a certain way of living for so long. You take somebody who's been sexually abused, right? And they build up these walls around them, you know? They get this idea of, like, this is what I have to do to survive. I built up these walls of lies and distrust and pain and sorrow and whatever. And you find that, you know, all the relationships that I have in this world, be it with other people, you know, sexually, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they're all tainted. The best way I've found to do that is for them to get forgiveness. And it's funny because like I'm not, again, like I said before, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an LCSW or anything like that. I'm a simple addictions guy, you know. And I found like my most successful clients when it comes to dealing with sexual trauma was through forgiveness. I find that very interesting. But again, I'm into action, not not so much on the emotional side. All right, I'm gonna go right through here. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and carry these messages in this message in all our affairs. So now I have all these spiritual principles that we're talking about, right? Honesty, hope, open-mindedness, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, brotherly love, discipline, perseverance, awareness of God, and service, right? Now, what do? It's like practice these principles in all my affairs. It's not just things within the addiction world, it's in all my affairs. How do I treat my wife? How do I treat my kids? How do I treat my business partner? How do I treat, you know, the people underneath me, above me? It doesn't matter. How do I treat myself? You know? You know, there's a famous saying, you know, it's like, don't judge my strength when I'm strong, judge my strength when I'm weak. Right? And in my weakness shows my true strength. When I'm at my weakest points, how do I react? What do I do? You know, and that's what we're learning here. Dr. Bob broke down the 12 steps into 2 words. He broke it down into love and service. Right? he broke it down and he said, that's what these steps break down into. It's like, yeah, I brought down these, these different things. I explained this 12 steps, but he says, it's all about love and service. Who do I love? I love myself. I love God. I love my fellow man. I love, I love nature. I love whatever it is. I just love. Second thing is service. I do for others. Before I walked into the 12-step ideal, it's like everything stemmed out of fear and pain. About being about being selfish. So I've got this fear and selfishness, and I translate that into love and service. That is the process that we're taking care of within the 12 steps, the things that we're doing. And I found it still to be true to this day. We look at it, right? And if you go to any AA, NA, CA, OA, any 12-step meeting, you see the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Love and service. God, please God, I'm asking for your help to grant me serenity, to accept things I can't change. There's a lot in this world that I can't do. I cannot run a marathon. I am 400 pounds. It's not going to happen. Put me on a football field, I can maul somebody. But I'm not running a marathon. You put me in front of a computer, I can turn it on, but that's about it. I type about 6 words a minute. We look at there's things I can't do, and there's things that I can do. The courage to change the things I can. Something's coming at me, something's hurting me, something's destroying me, something's doing something to me. I have to have wisdom to understand the difference between the two. And when I have that wisdom and I have the ability to act, the ability to do that action on it, I change a lot of what's going on within me. I have the ability to forgive the bastard. I have the ability to move forward in life. I have the ability to become the person that I want to be, to have the healthy relationships. Yonah Pollock was here last week and talking about, he was talking about addiction. And one of the things he talked about, the, addiction as a relationship, right? Now we understand that it was a perverted relationship when we walked into the rooms, and it's like, and when I say perverted relationship, I mean in everything. Being the substance or event that we were addicted to how we treated other people, how we treated ourselves, so on and so forth, to a healthy relationship, which is what we have today, which is what we have after going through these steps. And how do we keep this up? By giving it away, by continuously doing what we do with, for others. That's what we do. We do that concept of service. We do the idea of love. We show that to other people. That phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, going out there and being there for people and, opening meetings, doing all that stuff. Being that guy that says, you know what, you need a hand, I'm there for you. And are there any questions? Yes.
It sounds like the 12 steps are like kind of like a toolkit, I suppose, I mean, not to minimize it, but it's a toolkit. But I want to understand from your opinion the distinction between a sponsor who's going to actually utilize the toolkit versus an addictions counselor or therapist. In your opinion, would you say that addictions counselor or therapist should bring in the 12 steps into their sessions, or do we leave that fully to the sponsor? Well,
as an addictions counselor, I bring the 12 steps into my sessions. I'm not going to deny that, right? Because I believe in the power of them, right? I believe in the disease model. I believe in the power of the 12 steps, and I use it in my therapy, right? I also take a lot of things out of it. I take it from several different sources that I prefer. That it's like, I find that when I work with a guy who's been through trauma, right? And I say, getting out of your own way. And I deal with this guy and I say, you know what? What is it? What's the core of what we find? And I'll look at that and I'm like, excuse me, I'm just lost my train of thought here. When I look at the core of like that trauma and I see that these behaviors are X, Y, and Z, and I go and look behind the behaviors, that's a therapeutic ideal, right? I need to find. I look for the core. I look for I look for that idea of like, what's the basis of everything? Where in the 12 steps, I don't really care about the basis of everything. I care about the current actions. I can't do anything about the past. The past is over. It's already happened. We can't change it. I don't have a time machine. Can't go back, stop the guy from molesting or I don't know, the stealing, the robbing, raping, whatever, pillaging, whatever. I can't go back into the past and do that. What I can do is I can focus on the future, which is what you do with the 12 steps. Whereas therapy, you go back to the past and try and get a re-understanding of the situation.
So you're saying that as an addictions counselor, a therapist working with addictions, you're using the 12 steps as a framework with which to kind of delve deeper, whereas the sponsor is using it as a kind of a framework to progress along, like an action plan type of?
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you if you could define the point where you, as an addiction counselor, say to the person, I think you should consult a therapist. I think you should also do therapy in addition to our work. When is that point?
So that point is usually when I'm sitting there with the person, and if I feel that this is something that I'm qualified to deal with, mostly within the addiction field, right? If something goes out of the addiction field, I'll say to them I think now's the time for you to take this piece to somebody else, right? I don't have the training, I don't have the expertise to deal with that. Before we brought up abuse, be it emotional, physical, sexual, whatever. I don't have the actual training of going through that, to being okay, here's what we got to do, here's steps A, B, C, and D. So I say to them, okay, well, here's the numbers to several competent therapists who I believe can help you with that, be it EMDR, whatever they like to do. Personally, by the way, just for my own personal thing, I love EMDR, just for those who don't. I believe it's great for trauma. I've yet to see something better. So, that's usually what I do. I don't want to delve into the depths that a psychologist will, or a psychotherapist will deal into, because that's not my forte. My personal belief is I'm the field medic in a war. It's my job to put a tourniquet on somebody, stop the bleeding, and get him and hand him off to somebody, to a doctor, who can actually do the real surgery. That's more my belief. So, anything else? Yes?
Thank you for letting us hear your personal experience together with the steps.
No problem.
Sorry, so one question. I understand that in therapy sometimes it's, there's maybe a stigma or, kind of bring religion into the therapy room. But it sounds like, 12 steps, there's a lot of talk about God. And even if even if it's the kind of mnemonic where it's, an atheist can believe in as well, how do you kind of deal with that when there's a kind of a heavy religious undertone in there? Let's say a person, saying that a client is there and is really angry at God, really has no desire to take upon any type of spiritual understanding. They just want action. They just want to get better.
Again, the mnemonic, grow or die. It's not so fancy, it's not so difficult. I say to them, listen, you got two options. You can either suck it up and grow, or you can die. Stop, hold on a second. It's you gotta stop overcomplicating everything. Let's keep it simple here, There you go, keep it simple, stupid, It's
when you say admitted to God, you can't even make a cloud word enough without, are you ready to have God remove all our shortcomings? Someone who is kind of anti-spiritual or anti-religious or has no connection to that, how is that dealt with?
When you're talking about someone who's intelligent enough to be able to deal with all this, right? When it comes to intelligence, we say you want to be intelligent, but you have to do it with humility first. You have to have that humility to be able to see that, we were talking before about that process, that infant process of seeing outside of ourselves, You know, that's really what it's about. By able to see something out there, something greater than yourself, right? It's like you go outside and try to lift up a boulder. You know, you can't do it, but I can, right? Now, I try and run a marathon. I can't, but you can. You know, we both have abilities where we in different spots where we'll see there's a power greater than ourselves in that situation. And that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for that idea of like there's something out there that's just greater than who we are. We're looking for something that like a force that we can listen to. And sometimes that force just might be the room. You know, like the people in the room, like, you know, it's like whomever, you know, it's like whatever it is, whatever I deem that power greater than myself, like whatever I see out there, I just need it to be something greater than me so I don't be so selfish and become selfless. Anything else? I thank you all.
Thank you.